Okay, go ahead.
A warm welcome, everyone. And please bear with me. I'm pleased and honored to introduce John Graham, who is the director of the Giraffe Heroes Project, to give a talk today at the Maryland United for Peace and Justice as one of our guest speakers. I first met John in 2006 when I was invited by the World Bank and other development partners as one of a small group of promising young leaders to attend the first World Ethics Forum. The event took place at Oxford University in England. The event was hosted under the title Leadership, Ethics, and Integrity in Public Life. Not surprisingly, the event attracted both senior government officials, senior public and private sector leaders, educational leaders dealing with some of the most pressing issues of ethics and leadership in governance. As young leaders, we were charged with the responsibility to help shape the Youth Declaration. Under the guidance and facilitation of John Graham, young leaders participated in several youth forums and workshops. And it was at these forums that I first heard John introduce to us his Giraffe Heroes project and work. That forum created a powerful and lasting impression in my mind, and I'm sure in the minds of other young leaders who went home to their respective countries more inspired to carry out leadership roles in serving their local communities. Over time, John later traveled to Sierra Leone in 2011 to see firsthand the projects I have been undertaking, and also in setting up the local chapter of the Giraffe Heroes project. During John's visit, he met with civil society leaders, government officials, and NGOs, and he also held workshops on leadership to train local civil society leaders at the office of the Sierra Leone Search for Common Grounds. He was invited as a guest speaker at the Forabe College, University of Sierra Leone, and later on, John and I were guests at several radio stations in Sierra Leone to unveil the work of the Giraffe Heroes Project to the country and the people. I think John may have also made similar visits to other countries to meet with local giraffe leaders and to inspire and motivate them in their courageous work in tackling problems related to human rights, peace promotion, environmental concerns, and so on. Finally, many of you may have read John's full bio on the flyer, but I think I must extract that portion which is very relevant for his presentation today. And that is, for the last 35 years, John Graham has been a leader of the Giraffe Heroes Project, which is a global movement inspiring people to stick their necks out to solve problems, public problems, and to give them the tools to succeed. John will talk about these experiences, especially in relation to how they promote peace, justice, good governance, and democracies in challenging portions around the world. John, over to you.
Ah, thank you, Andrew. I'm uh, I'm very happy to be speaking to a group focused on peace and justice, two concerns that obviously are vital to me as they are to you. And as Andrew was saying, for the last 38 years, I've helped lead the Giraffe Heroes Project, which is a global movement that inspires people to stick their necks out. I didn't start it, by the way. I have to always start by saying that, as people give me credit for starting it. I wasn't imaginative enough to do that. My wife, Ann Medlock, started the project in 1983. And she started it by realizing, living in New York, that there are all kinds of good things happening that people weren't noticing. And the newspapers all picked up the bad stuff, the fires, the rapes, the pillage, whatever. And so she knew that we needed to help start telling the stories of real heroes to inspire the rest of us. And that in turn would inspire people to take on tough public problems and move society ahead. So she started the Giraffe Heroes Project, using, of course, the metaphor of the giraffe with the long neck. And there's a lot more on giraffe.org, so I won't say any more. Andrew and I have said enough for the moment. But the basic strategy of the Giraffe Project is almost absurdly simple. We find people taking risks to solve tough public problems, and these giraffe heroes, of course, are men and they're women. They're young and they're old. They're from every ethnic and economic background and from over 60 countries. And they're tackling every kind of public problem you can think of: racism, violence, corruption, injustice, pollution, poverty, much more. We tell our stories of these heroes in our publications, on our website, and blogs, at public events, and in the media, and most of all online. Others see and hear these stories and are inspired to take on the challenges important to them. I like to say sometimes that we're the troubadours for our age. We're telling the stories of heroes and transforming society in the process. I'm going to tell you a few examples so you get a better idea of who these heroes are. Hold on for a second. I'm going to test our technology again. I have to share my screen here. Okay, now, do you all see a picture? Is it coming across? Hello?
Yep, it's there.
Okay. This guy's named Michael Lame. He's in Los Angeles. He walked away from a lucrative legal career to start and run a foundation for Mideast communication, which provides workshops in which Arabs and Jews in the Middle East and the US face each other openly to talk and to listen. Lame often goes into conflict zones to do his workshops, despite threats and accusations that he's a spy or a provocateur. Here's somebody else. Yes, Hannah Hopko. You see Hannah? Still working? Great.
No, not yet.
Ooh,
We're still seeing the first picture.
now do you see the woman?
Yep, now we see her.
Okay. She braved snipers' bullets in Kiev during a people's revolution that brought down the corrupt Ukrainian government. She now leads a rapidly growing group of citizens who are creating a legislative revolution in the Ukraine, drafting new laws, policies for fair and open government, then lobbying to have them adopted by that country's parliament. Her car was destroyed, her life's been threatened, but 10 of her group's proposed laws have already been adopted. The next one. Aha. You see these two guys?
Yep, they're there.
All right. This is my my wife, Ann Medlock's favorite giraffe heroes. The bond of friendship between Azim Khamisa on the left and Plez Felix is strong, resolute, and born out of a shared tragedy. Felix's grandson shot and killed Khamisa's son in a gang initiation. Now the father and the grandfather work together to end youth violence and to reform the criminal justice system. When children kill, there are victims at both ends of a gun, says Khamisa. Now, the Giraffe Project, when the pandemic hit last year, we asked ourselves, well, what can we do? And the answer was pretty clear. We should keep doing what we've always done. We do best. We tell the stories of heroes. So we began focusing our work for most of last year on men and women on the front lines of battle against COVID-19. And those COVID heroes are people like, I wanted to tell you the story of Helen Chu. In early 2020, after the first rumors of a strange new virus in China, Dr. Helen Chu, an infectious disease expert at the University of Washington, knew she and her team should use her ongoing flu study to test for the coronavirus. But she was repeatedly ordered not to do that by bureaucrats citing the rules. She repeatedly defied those orders, directing her team to keep testing. A potential pandemic needs to be stopped, never mind the rules, was her position. Her work finally convinced the medical establishment that a lethal virus had landed in the United States and that strong steps were needed to stop it. For 2 crucial months, Chu's warnings were ignored, then downplayed by the White House. You all remember that the first COVID cases happened right here in the Seattle area. And finally, another example of a giraffe hero we honored during the pandemic is Reginald Cole, who was a young Sierra Leonean doctor risking his life in the face of infectious diseases and the poor health conditions of his country. He's continued to contribute to the health of his fellow citizens and set an example for fellow doctors. So these are just 5 out of the almost, 1,400 and counting. Hold on a second. 1,400 and counting giraffe heroes that we've honored since 1984. Realizing that inspiration alone is not enough, we follow up our stories with books and blogs, trainings, and leadership citizen action. And for 2 decades, we've been creating programs for schools and youth organizations all over the world, helping kids build lives as courageous and compassionate citizens. And we've just received funds to release a Spanish version of our flagship programs. In 2008, we formed Giraffe Heroes International as an umbrella for all of our overseas affiliates, focusing on poor and often violent countries that can most use the inspiration and the trainings that we offer. One of the first, as Andrew said, was in Sierra Leone, where I first met him. And there are now 7 other affiliates, Andrew, scattered over the Middle East, South America, and Africa. As I said, the strategy of the Giraffe Heroes Project is absurdly simple, but it works. Telling the stories of heroes really does shift attitudes, move people into action, as it has for thousands of years in every culture and in every place. As you might expect, as often as we can, we ask the giraffe heroes we honor why they do what they do. Why do they take these risks and work so hard to help other people? Nobody pays them to do it, and nobody orders them to do it. What pushes them to be as energetic and as committed? What makes them so inspiring? What makes them so successful? Many of these giraffe heroes, in so many words, tell us that this is a foolish question. The problem they're working on was right in front of them, they say, and nobody else was doing anything about it. So what else were they supposed to do? But as you dig deeper into talking to giraffe heroes, the clearer it gets that what motivates them most is a strong sense that what they're doing is meaningful to them. That is, that it satisfies a personal sense of purpose at the very core of their beings. It's this deep conviction that their actions are personally meaningful that drives them forward. It's what makes them so effective in solving problems and so inspiring to people who hear their stories. Well, of course, it isn't just giraffe heroes who are motivated by a personal sense of meaning. Philosophers and spiritual leaders have been telling us for millennia that there's no deeper human need and no more powerful yearning than to live a life we know is meaningful. We all want to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror in the morning and know that we're on the planet for a reason, that we're not just here marking time. I mean, let's look at our own experiences. Isn't it true that the more meaning there is in the things we do, the more alive we feel? Like giraffes, we may work hard, there may be trials, but when you're doing something you know is meaningful, there's an energy and excitement, the deep satisfaction of being in the right place at the right time. You're more inspiring to other people. They're attracted to join you, follow your lead, and you're much more likely to get the results you want. This is the biggest lesson, I should say, we've learned in almost 4 decades of doing this giraffe work, the enormous power of living a meaningful life. If meaning is this important as a motivator, it's fair to ask, I think, what's meaning? Where does meaning come from? And again, we go back to these giraffe heroes, these 1,400 exceptional people sticking in an exile, because after all, they should know. And the answer from these giraffe heroes, almost universally, is that the most stable long-term source of meaning in their lives is service, helping solve tough public problems, making life better for other people. I have to confess to you all that this is not a lesson I learned as a young man. I thought I knew then what made my life meaningful, and it wasn't service, it wasn't helping people. It was adventure. The bigger and more dangerous, the better. I shipped out on a freighter to the Far East the summer after my junior year in high school when I was barely 17. 2 years later, I hitchhiked through the Algerian Revolution. At 20, I was on the team that made the first ascent of Denali's North Wall in Alaska, a mountain climb so dangerous it's never been repeated. I hitchhiked around the world at 22, working as a correspondent in every war I came across. A U.S. Foreign Service officer for 15 years, I was in the middle of the revolution in Libya and the war in Vietnam. In that career, I was tough and smart and brave, and I did very well in the Foreign Service. Then came a turning point. In 1977, I was transferred to the U.S. mission to the United Nations, and part of my job there was to represent the United States on the Security Council committee that dealt with South Africa and apartheid, which, as all of you know very well, was a racist system subjugating blacks in South Africa. The UN was supposed to enforce an arms embargo on South Africa because guns sold to the South African white regime in those years was used to enforce apartheid and to kill blacks. But that embargo leaked like a sieve. Why? Because there were huge amounts of money involved in the arms trade, and the arms dealers had their friends in parliaments in Europe and in our own Congress. So I ignored my instructions to not make waves and instead worked secretly for months to tighten that embargo. I did that by helping third world countries on the Security Council increase their pressure on my own government. Once our Secretary of State received a strong message from an African foreign minister complaining about American hypocrisy in not enforcing the arms embargo against South Africa. And in this man's message, I recognized words that I myself had drafted 2 weeks before. I'd slipped the words to an African diplomat at the United Nations who'd sent them back to his capital. And as I'd planned, they'd come roaring back. When my strategy was humming, I'd then gone to my own bosses in Washington and remarked on the huge upsurge of pressure coming from the third world to tighten the embargo and the enormous pressure being put on the Carter administration to live up to its promises, pressure that I myself had helped generate. And it worked. The US agreed to a really tough arms embargo on South Africa. The Europeans on the Security Council had no choice but to follow suit. And on May 2nd, 1980, that embargo was passed by the Security Council, and in time, it helped end apartheid. At any time in this process, I could have been fired or even jailed. So why did I do this? Why did I take these risks? I did it because of one day spent in South Africa. The day began in the squalor and oppression of the black township of Soweto. I walked down garbage-strewn streets. I felt the hate-filled eyes of hundreds of young black men boring into the back of my white head. I couldn't blame them. And the day ended with a diplomatic cocktail party in Johannesburg's fanciest white suburb in a mansion surrounded by iron fences and guard dogs. Apartheid stank, and I resolved to do something to end it. At a deeper level, I took those risks because helping end the injustice of apartheid meant something to me at the deepest place in my soul, something more than adventure or power. It was, however, not lost on me that I had just had the best adventure of my life, and it had nothing to do with hanging from on a rope from a cliff or dodging bullets. That experience of me, South Africa, was like learning to swim. I couldn't forget what I'd done. I couldn't forget how to do it. I couldn't forget the joy and fulfillment I felt in making a difference like that. I'd found the meaning of my life, and like Giraffe heroes, I'd found it in service, in bettering the lives of others and helping solve a significant public problem. I'm hardly alone. Since then, I've watched many other people make the same discovery, find the meaning of their lives in service, helping other people. Watch them use that discovery to fuel their commitment and their energy to take on tough tasks and succeed, and to experience the satisfaction of living their lives to the fullest. What's been true for them and true for me, for Giraffe Heroes, is certainly true for each of you, I guarantee it. I'll end with a line from Mary Oliver's poem, A Summer's Day. Some of you have undoubtedly heard it before, but I love it. She says, "What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" What a question. My answer is the answer the Giraffe Project found almost 40 years ago. Stick your neck out to find the meaning of your life through service. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you very much, John.
Any questions? Paulette, you're running the clock here, so let me, comments. I know all of you have distinguished careers and doing great things in peace and justice, and this is just a story of one person, me. You've all got your story. Any comments or questions about the Giraffe Project, about what we do? Again, the website is giraffe.org, so all those practical questions of who we are, how we're funded, all that kind of stuff is on the website.
Okay, Dave? Dave, do you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I poured blood on draft files out of a sense of adventure. And as a writer, looking to have something to write about. Now, when I look at change, I see electoral politics, voting the bad guys out as sort of a solution. Service to others in a Dorothy Day Catholic worker sense is very admirable. I follow that, but how to actually achieve change in a capitalist society, what is the best way? I'm always
I
trying.
don't hear you anymore.
Can't hear me?
No, I can. You just faded out for a second.
All right. What is the best way to achieve change? And not all of us are going to run for office. So, of course, we do what according to our talents. But I still like to think of what is the best way to change this system.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And I call your attention to the fact that my organization is called the Giraffe Project for a reason. We too are very appreciative of the pure service offered by so many people over so many years. It's very important. But what we're looking for is something more than service. We're looking for service that takes courage, service where you have to stick your neck out. We get a lot of nominations, for example, Dave, to be Giraffe Heroes and they tell us about people who are doing wonderful service work. Perhaps, for example, they've been showing up to work at a soup kitchen every Thursday night for 20 years or something or whatever. And we very politely decline to name them as giraffes and give their stories on to other organizations, because what we're looking for is not people who have been doing wonderful service, but not necessarily taking any risk. For example, in the soup kitchen example, we might honor as a Giraffe hero the person that started the soup kitchen against enormous NIMBY pressures not to do it 20 years before. It's something that took guts, facing down neighbors and stuff. That's the kind of person we look for. So the first part of my answer to your question is, we're looking for courageous action. We're looking for people willing to stick their necks out. And that means exactly what it says. It means looking at the odds, doing something brave, being willing to accept the consequences if you fail. And this is where real change happens, and it always has, whether you're talking about Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or whoever. These are very brave people, and they've stuck their necks out, and some of them have paid for it with their lives. These are the people that we're looking for. And also, we're also, I should have said, maybe I did, I forgot, but we don't just tell stories. We have also developed over the last 30 years a whole series of trainings. I've written 4 books, for example, on leadership and risk-taking. And because we know that just sticking your necks out, even that may not work if you don't know what you're doing. So we train people to be activists. Same thing you all do, I'm sure. We do a lot of trainings in helping people develop competence at taking effective citizen action. And we do that now all the way down to the kindergarten level with our schools program. So it's a combination of getting people to stick their necks out, focusing on service that comes from a deep meaning of why they're doing it, and then doing the homework and having the street smarts to increase the odds of success. We've learned to combine all these things because nothing's more important to us than succeeding. I mean, we want gun control. We want peace in the Middle East. We want all the things that you want. And we're smart enough to know that simply wanting and hoping isn't enough. I totally get it. So look at us as very tough-minded people who, I shall say so, really know what we're doing. And we draw on the strength and wisdom of the people that we honor. Sorry, long answer, but that's
So,
fine.
do you honor people who've actually lost their lives, sticking their necks out?
Yes, we do. We do. Although we don't honor people who are already dead. I mean, for example, we've never honored, for example, Dr. King as a giraffe. If he were alive, we certainly would, because. And the other thing is, and this is regards to people like Dr. King as well, we tend to focus on ordinary people. People like Dr. King, or Robert Kennedy, Mahatma Gandhi, they're already famous and they don't really need a little teeny nonprofit in Washington State to tell their stories because everybody knows their stories. We're looking, well, the 5 people whose stories I told, I dare say you never heard of any of them. And that's by purpose. We look for ordinary people. I mean, if you want, if you want a bank teller to be a giraffe hero, you don't say, hey, be like Abraham Lincoln. No. You show that bank teller the story of another bank teller who's doing some brave action, maybe halfway around the world, so that the bank teller sees, oh, there's a bank teller sticking his or her neck out. I'll do the same thing. So we're looking at ways to get under people's radar, to get them to think about themselves as a giraffe hero. And you don't do that by giving them these huge examples. Oh, I could never be Abraham Lincoln. Are you
Right,
crazy?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's good.
Okay, I have a question. I often struggle with the idea of like discerning what would actually be a service, a true service to mankind versus maybe a disservice. And in that regard, I can think of a few kind of gray area examples, like maybe Edward Snowden. Many people, well, you have to admit, he certainly stuck his neck out.
Yeah.
He paid the price for it. But whether you would say what he did was good or not, well, I think you might get a lot of controversy on that. It's the same thing. Like, I can't remember his name now. What was it? Jonathan Pollard, I guess, who was
the Israeli spy. Yeah. Right.
And he certainly thought he was of service to, well, certainly he's a big hero in Israel, not so much maybe in many parts of the USA. So that's kind of the area I want you to explore.
Yeah, I would like to invite you to be on our choosing committee, because we have exactly the same argument every month. Our criteria, by the way, I urge you, go onto our website, and one of the buckets on the leader bar, whatever you call it at the top, is choosing a giraffe or nominating a giraffe. And it gives 2 pages of our criteria. The 2 main criteria are that the person stick his or her neck out, and the second is that they do it for the common good. Both of these things are controversial. What's a risk for me, for example, as a tall white male, may not be a risk for somebody else, or what's a risk for, whatever. So the risk can be debatable. When we honor, for example, children who take risks, and for a child, a young person, the risk often is peer pressure. Other kids on the playground saying, goody, goody, 2 shoes. Well, that wouldn't be a risk for a 38-year-old. I mean, so there's that difference. But the big thing is, what is the common good, which really gets to your question. And we argue about that. We won't nominate someone for a giraffe hero who's done what they've done through violence. We don't do that. But we look for common good, which means being of service that's more than to yourself and to your family, something at least as broad as your community. And you're right, there's absolutely real controversy. I suspect that maybe even, what's her name, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that nutcase from Georgia or Alabama, or wherever she's from, she thinks she's doing something for the common good by espousing QAnon theories. So we have to make some judgments of what the common good is. And it's we do argue over it. And I must say that it's pretty rare to have a unanimous vote, because we choose controversial people. And some of them, like, for example, Pollard, he's an anti-war activist. He's against nuclear weapons, and yet he broke his country's laws to blow the whistle and divulged classified information. So yeah, he's a criminal by some lights and a hero in others. It's difficult.
So could I ask a question, John?
Sure, yes.
This is Art Milholland.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your website. You have an awful lot of material on training, teaching teens and children. Can you talk about that kind of spirit of teaching or training kids and children, and how you actually get an opportunity to do that?
Oh boy, I could go on for a day on that one, because it's our schools program is a huge part of the operation, and we started it in the early 1990s. We were sailing along with the Giraffe Heroes Project. It had grown rapidly. We were already becoming well known. And then we had a bunch of people, mostly teachers and parents, who came up to us and says, well, don't you guys realize that if you want people to be brave and courageous and public spirited, you can't just tell them when they're 38. You got to start when they're 8. You got to start when they're, little kids. This is how people learn these values. So you should do something for schools. So we started looking at what we would do for schools, and we realized that the same strategy in effect applies. You have to tell stories. So all of our schools programs, the center of all of our schools programs is telling stories. Now, of course, dealing with a kindergarten class, the kids can't read. So the teacher reads stories, and we have the stories in, we're not dumb. We have the stories in appropriate language, throttled down to reading levels. And as the kids learn to read, and they can also, of course, now